This is Shalom World Podcast.
Have you ever thought about the clash between our digital world and what's right and wrong? That's where The Porn Disaster comes in, a series that dives into one of society's most hush-hush topics. Get ready for some real talk as we dig into the ups and downs of today's tech-driven desires. Kids, relationships, recovery, we're not holding back. From the Catholic Church's take on porn to why our brains get hooked, we cover it all. Join us as we chat about the messy stuff, the good, the bad, and the uncomfortable. Hosted by Patricia Keane, we've got an expert panel here to chat about porn addiction, what it does, how it affects us, and how we can heal.
Hello, welcome to Shalom World. My name is Patricia Keane and we're coming to you from Maynooth in County Kildare, Ireland. I'm here to present a series on pornography called The Porn Disaster. Parents don't want to believe that their child could be watching pornography.
The pornography industry is looking for every child.
So the peer pressure is on the child, but it's also on the parent.
And it's very difficult when the child is like, everybody else has one.
If you put a mobile phone into their hand, you're putting a weapon into their hands. We are on to episode 6 of our series today, and today's episode is about some myths that we want to debunk for parents and also child protection and safety on the internet. And my guest today,
Father Chris Hayden, priest from the Diocese of Ferns, Ireland, spiritual director, St. Patrick's Seminary, Maynooth. Father Alan Hoffa, priest from the Diocese of Allentown, USA. He has BA in Philosophy and Masters in Divinity. Dr. Kielty Oberlin. She's from Ireland, doctorate in Psychology and Masters in Counseling, specializing in eating disorder recovery. Gerard O'Donoghue. He is an engineer from Ireland, counseling parents and creating awareness around pornography.
what we're doing today is that we've looked at research around some myths that parents believe, and we want to help them understand what these myths are about, and also give some support and help. It's very much an optimistic message that we have here, that is it easier to protect a child than trying to fix an adult? Well, I think we all agree that it is easier to protect a child than trying to fix an adult, because if you've been following this series, you will understand what pornography does to a child and the harm it causes in all sorts of ways, and the messages that pornography gives to children. If they carry them into childhood or into adulthood, well, then we're dealing with more problems. So, Father Alan, I'm going to you first. You are the man on the ground. You're in the battle against pornography. You speak to parents all of the time and individuals travelling the country, speaking to them about all sorts of issues regarding pornography. You're listening to what parents are telling you, the questions that they're asking. And one of the questions is that people don't want to be different. Parents don't want to be different, and parents don't want to believe that their child could be watching pornography. It's not something that a parent wants to believe, that they are watching pornography. So what do you have to say to a parent around how to investigate that?
One of the things that we know is that in every facet of life, the internet is a reality for us. Children are using it in schools, adults are using it. We all use it. It is a necessary part of life. No one can avoid the internet. If they do, they're really out of mainstream culture in a way. However, as we talk about in our faith, it is one thing to be in the world, it is another thing to be of the world. And while we are called to be in the world, we do not need to be of the world. And so when it comes to the internet, it is more important about parents teaching their children how to use the internet responsibly. However, at the same time, being protective of their children, because even for the child who's considered the best child or the most well-behaved or very mature for their age, they still have the opportunity, because of the pornography industry, to come across the pornography. Yes, you may not have a child who goes intentionally looking for pornography. Wonderful. But at the same time, the pornography industry is looking for every child. And I think that that's very important. That's why the diligence and the vigilance on the part of parents is so essential. And this document that we used in preparing for this segment about these 3 myths comes from a website called Defend Young Minds. I have found in my work it is one of the best tools for parents to be able to use in allowing someone else at a professional level to supply parents with the cutting-edge, leading information that is out there about all of these cyber threats that there are for their children, especially when it regards this issue of pornography. And it reminds parents that they are part of a greater whole. It's not one parent who's standing up to do something that's completely out of the ordinary or completely ridiculous. No, this is something that parents, the more and more that they find commonality amongst themselves, that we can support one another in this battle for the sake of our children, for the sake of their holiness, their sexuality, for the sake of their souls, then there's encouragement to use these resources and to also talk to other parents so that there is power in number in protecting their children, and they can learn from one another as they walk about with this journey. So it is important when you talk about the child that you may think that they never will, and that's perfectly fine. However, the reality is that the porn industry is a predator, and they are predatory for children because the sooner that they can get them hooked, they're going to. And so it's important to have those discussions, and it's also important to use the digital tools that are out there to be able to help children use their devices responsibly, because again, it's not necessarily that they're all going looking for it, but they could find themselves going in a roundabout way, finding it by accident, and that accidental moment can still cause a grave mark of trauma in their life.
If you put a mobile phone into the hands of a 6-year-old child. I see babies with mobile phones in their hands,
yes.
But let's say a child of some type of reasoning age. Okay, we'll start at a 6-year-old. If you put a mobile phone into their hand, you're putting a weapon into their hand. So how do you expect to protect a child if a person does not have a monitoring system on it?
Well, that's the first thing. You get the monitoring pieces, use the things that are available already on the phone. But the other part of it is to make sure that, the open lines of communication are there between child and parent, so that if they do see something that's off-putting, that they're able to bring that to the parent. But also, when you consider this issue of giving that child that device, it can do anything. It can harm. And the other thing too is that sometimes we need to practice restraint. It is a big wave in education that introducing technology is really, really important. But what studies are showing is that the devices and technology are there to be a supplement to the core realities of basic education. Schools that have put the devices into place as the primary means of communicating education have actually had an adverse effect on student learning. The same thing goes with children. It's fine for children to use the internet, even a child to have a tablet or something, but if it is not monitored properly, if there is not, for instance, screen time allowances and things like this, it can have a negative effect in the child's life. So it is one of those things where, yes, if you make a choice to let your child use a device, fine. But there is a responsibility incumbent on the parent, because later on down the line, it may not be in that moment, it may not be in the next few years, but there is the possibility, a strong possibility, that down the road, there are things happening in that young child's life because of that technology that can have an adverse effect on them, even to the trauma of seeing pornography at a very young age. So again, I'm not anti-technology. What I am is pro-responsibility.
Nobody wants to be different at any age. Okay, conversations happen and they're around modern things, and everybody wants to be part of that conversation. And I've learned from mothers is that they are actually afraid to say something because they know they're going to be attacked. They know whatever they say is going to be debunked, as in, how do you know anything about this? You're not qualified. But yet you're talking about parents that rally together. And how do you get parents to rally together? What's the language we need to use to teach parents that, when somebody says this to you, say that, that you're able to respond in an appropriate way. That would encourage mothers to rally together. So where do you start with that?
There's multiple ways that we can talk about this word in the context of this issue of pornography. But in this case, as it regards parents, it's the word shame. A lot of times, one of the biggest things that can help is once a parent has gone through something, the difference between them feeling the shame over what has happened to their child and them saying nothing about it in the public sphere because of shame versus saying something so that no one else's child that they know has to go through this same pain that they've gone through. And I think that that's where we need to take a step back, and we need to look at ourselves not just for our own well-being, but for the greater well-being of children and our human family. So that when you go and experience the fact that, let's say for instance, you find out that your child has been watching pornography and it becomes this big revelation. Okay, now what do? Of course, you're going to work to get your child help. Don't shame them, but get them the help that they need to make sure that they are receiving the healing, because it is a trauma. Regardless, it's a trauma that has happened in that moment. But the other side of this too is to make sure to take that knowledge and not hold it to yourself. Again, even with all of these protections that we're talking about, let's be clear, all of these protections that we're talking about, it can still happen. The chances are greatly lowered of it happening, but it can still happen. So even with the most vigilant parent, okay, so that's for a parent to say, well, all the good parents, this would never happen to. No. What would be considered by some standard a good parent, it can still happen to their child. So in that vein, it is important to then not live under that shame of, I did something wrong as a parent, I'm a bad parent. Rather, I don't want this to happen to my child again. I don't want this to happen to my other children. I don't want this to happen to anyone else's children. And so there becomes the point of, when you're with other parents, to have that discussion because you care. At the end of the day, none of us would ever want to say that we had some type of knowledge that we could share with someone else that would have stopped their child from experiencing hurt or harm. This is the exact thing. For someone who is listening, watching this right now, you have the knowledge. You have the tools. Don't let anybody put you down to say, how do you know this? You don't know anything. You do, because the professionals are here talking about this reality. Now you have it, and go and share it. Go and share these videos. Go and share this information, because it can change and save lives.
There's a school some miles away from here, and that local town had 3 consecutive suicides of young people. They were related to bullying. And it affected the whole community very, very badly. And the initiative came from the school itself to not allow children to bring in mobile phones. So these are under 13s, not to bring mobiles into the school. And then the initiative went really, really well. And parents then decided that, well, they weren't going to allow them a mobile phone until they were 13 years of age.
Lovely.
And the initiative just spread throughout the whole town. But what it did was that it changed the perspective of the word care. Instead of a parent feeling guilty that they had been snooping around their 13-year-old daughter or son's phone, they began to have a sense of, this is important, this is my place, there's pride in doing this because I'm actually showing that I care. Mm-hmm. So you had a whole town that came out and said, darn, we do care about our children. 13 years of age is the time when they go into secondary school. But between, that 0 and that 13, it gives the parents time to reshape the child's activities on the phone, to introduce more sport, more community activities. Mm-hmm. So if you were to encourage parents to do that, how would you go about it, Kielty?
Yeah, we need to talk to the parents as a whole and show them that, to make a group decision, because the challenge is that, our father was saying, and you were saying, nobody wants to be different. And it's very difficult when the child is like, everybody else has one. And then both of you are standing against other initiatives of a whole town or a school getting behind and an idea. I've heard of other schools where they make a pact at the beginning of first primary school not to have mobile phones until graduation, or parents can reassess at that point, but that it's a school policy that all parents in the school. I think it may be similar to what you're talking about.
Father Allen, just going back to you again, because of your involvement with Integrity Restored, which is all about helping people recover from pornography and those that are damaged by it and betrayed by it and so on. But are there resources on Integrity Restored where people can look at that would help parents in this issue? Or does Integrity Restored have some books about this?
One of the big things that we're about is education.
Yes.
It's important to make sure that that parents are educated to be able to help their child. And one of the books that we primarily promote is a book called Plunging Pornography, a Catholic Bathroom Book. And usually people get a chuckle out of it. At least over in the States, there are some people that have a tradition of a magazine basket or something in the loo, as they say it across the pond here, so that there's some type of reading entertainment as you're there using the facilities. But that's why it's titled that way. But the thought is that the parents would get the book, read it, get educated, and then leave it out, whether it's on the counter somewhere or somewhere in the house, that the child says, "What is this? Good. Read it and let's have a conversation." But that should not be the first time a parent's concern over the things that threaten their child come up. Because again, if we're talking about 8 and 9 years old being the first time of exposure, this book is aimed more at that 5th grade, 6th grade, a little bit after that. We're talking about 11, 12 years old for the child. But the parent can pick it up many years earlier, educate themselves so that they're prepared and have those core realities there that are important. Now, what we also do is we also recommend other great sources, like, for instance, Defend Young Minds. So we all have our different niche in the work of doing this, and it's important for us to work together with those other organizations so that everyone has the tools to address different things in this regard.
Joe, you want to come in there?
Yeah, I'm in a fortunate position that I'm the youngest of 9, and my older brothers and sisters have children. They're 10 or 12 years ahead of me. And, 10 or 12 years ago, smartphones came in, around 2010 or 12. But people got caught off guard. Parents back then got caught off guard. It was one thing to have a phone, but all of a sudden it became a smartphone. And as I said in the previous series here, it's not a phone. You're giving them a device, you're giving them a computer with a phone app, a browsing device. So I've said to my daughter, saying, "Dad, when am I getting a phone?" I said, "When you're leaving this house, when you're an adult, when you're going." And my son, same question. And because they see their friends with phones, okay? So back, as Kielty said, when everybody has a smartphone, so the peer pressure is on the child, but it's also on the parent. Now, so if I'm down on the side of the GEA pitch and I say my children aren't getting a phone at all, straight away the other parents are saying, "Oh, you're better, I'm going to get their back up." So I think where we have to go now with parents is the prevention. So this is where you put on the different filtering, because the phones are out there. So
and they're going to stay.
And to take a phone back off a child now, you may as well put 2 heads on their shoulders. They're going to stick out where the friends, everything. So that's not going to happen. So we have to be realistic.
So let's have a look at the safety devices for smartphones and the home routers, everything where you can block that road to children accessing porn. So what have you got there, Ger, to begin with?
There's one called Bark. Well, Bark is similar to Canopy. For example, I'll go with Canopy first. That's like artificial intelligence. So it will stop any pornographic images, etc., showing up. Same as websites.
Where can you buy it?
You can buy it online. And like, say, if you want 10 devices, a whole family suite is €100 a year. Bark is a little bit more expensive. The whole house is covered for around €150 a year.
What about the home routers? What do we have to tell parents? Father Allen, do you know?
When it gets into your internet service, a lot of that depends on the service that you have through your provider. Some of them can put certain things and restrictions on. A lot of times you get into higher IT realities. So when it comes to usually a home, using things like bark and canopy are usually the better way to go, because you're going to be having multiple expenses. And let's face it, who has while we care, at the same time, it is a financial reality that you're in taking on all this cost. So if you do have the ability to be able to call your internet provider and have a certain internet package that limits certain things, that's always a great thing. But using these different filtering softwares, because things like bark and canopy are also good in the regard of taking or keeping an eye on other things, for instance, bullying for the child and other adverse at-risk things that might be coming up in the context of the phone. And then what goes on top of that, which we can talk about it in a future segment, is when we get into Covenant Eyes, which is more for monitoring strictly in an accountability facet for those who have struggled with pornography. And that you can use that for younger or for teens if they've already been involved in it. But I think that bark and canopy would be sufficient at this point to be able to bring that as a usable tool for parents.
So we're coming to the end of episode 6, and thank you for your sharing on this one and for your information. In episode 7, we're going to begin looking at have we become a pornographic people? What are we missing? Are we so used to looking at soft porn, which is everywhere, that we have moved to missing the porn images? So we're going to investigate that in view of, the disaster that pornography is for young families and parents. So please do join us for episode 7. Father, your closing prayer for this one, please.
And it's Psalm 139. Oh, where can I go from your spirit, or where can I flee from your face? For it was you who created my being, knit me together in my mother's womb. See that I follow not the wrong path, and lead me in the path of life eternal.
And that wraps up another episode of The Porn Disaster. Thank you to our incredible panelists for sharing your expertise and insights. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in and being part of this important conversation. If you've been impacted by anything we discussed today, know that help is available. Understanding leads to healing, and by shedding light on these tough topics, we are one step closer to positive change. Join us next time for another enlightening discussion. Until then, take care and stay curious.
Shalom World Podcasts is now available on all online platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and others.